Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for September 2023. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs, and by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/roguewatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. Shout out to Koa. This month's topic, as determined by the Patreon poll, is ending a campaign. All good things must come to an end, including D&D campaigns. Do we end with an epic climax that ties everything together, or a quiet whimper after everyone has long since lost interest? How do we determine when a campaign has run its course, or conversely, when we decide to continue the adventure in a new direction? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have James.
Hello.
Lumpy Spuds.
Hello.
Brandon.
Hi.
And Corey.
Hi there.
So I have ended a few campaigns now as 5th edition. Most recently, the Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign a couple months ago, which I believe was my longest DM'd campaign at about 2 years. All of the campaigns that I have run, however, have been published modules from the book, and they've all had pretty distinct, beginnings and endings. I've obviously added my own things along the way, and my own little modules, and sometimes just third-party modules. But the ending has generally always been pretty much what I've done from the book. So I haven't really had to change or modify anything when it comes to the end. Now, I never know exactly when the end is going to come in terms of like, oh, this is an 18-month campaign or this is a 16-month campaign. That's always impossible to tell. Even until I get within, maybe 8 or 9 weeks, then I start being like, okay, now I can, in fact, you can go back and watch the crafting streams leading up to that campaign, and you can watch me go, okay, maybe I can try to anticipate when we're going to end this thing. But the end point has generally, I've always known what the ending is going to be, and I always try to make sure whatever little character stories or arcs were going on are going to wrap up by that point, or I will maybe make a little bit of note and just say, oh, we'll include this as part of the epilogue. But I haven't really made any major changes or modifications to any of my endings. James, let's start with you, whether from a DM perspective or a player perspective. Do you have any specific anecdotes or thoughts on when campaigns end or how to end a campaign?
Yeah, so as an adult, they've all just kind of petered out as people, eventually couldn't make it anymore. I think the one time that we did have like a really solid, satisfying end was when I was a teenager, and it was I was moving away, so it was my last time playing D&D. So my brother, who was the DM, kind of wrapped up this story, and it was Dark Sun, where if you get to like a certain level, you kind of go through this metamorphosis.
Lumpy, tell me about your experience. And Lumpy also told us earlier before we started the recording that just recently or you're about to, I think, end a 3-year-long campaign entirely homebrewed. So please, let's get a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, so I started the campaign back in 2020 and with a group of friends back east and everything. And it was supposed to be 6 months. It's been 3 years now. Basically, I got a lot of the ideas of when to end that campaign from session 0, though. They all had different things that they wanted to accomplish in the game, and I wanted to make sure that they could go through and do all of those things. And it's only after 3 years that we finally have ticked all the boxes that they had, and so now we're getting ready to close it up. So they're level 16, starting from level 1, and they're about to fight the guy that they met back at level 3. And they've traveled to all these different planes. They have there were some crazy dungeons that I made a crazy amusement park that they went into because one of them said they wanted to see like magical equivalents of real world things. So yeah, they've done everything. So now I made a super boss battle that we're going to do on Monday. They just got up to the final chamber, and they're going to defeat Grundleton Gringlemeyer.
So this campaign has, because of the structure you have, has allowed you to kind of insert whatever storylines or even entire worlds that you want to.
Oh yeah, one of the things that I did was I based the campaign on a wish paradox. That basically the players got pulled into this kind of time loop thing that kept going on, and every time it went through another cycle, things would get weirder and weirder. So they started seeing one of the players' face in different things, and then it was like, oh yeah, that guy looks just like Gort. That guy looks just like Gort, and they kept seeing this over and over again, and so they tried to track it down. So, with something that was very personal to one of the characters, they kind of drove the story where they wanted it to go. They would talk to an NPC that allowed me to then say, "Oh, well, you can go on to here." They would. It was complete sandbox. So, at one point, they just started getting so powerful that they defeated a dragon in like I want to say it was like 5 or 6 rounds. So it's like, oh, this is nothing. So I just had to come up with crazier and crazier things for them to do. And so they ended up going to, uh, I said it was like a far realm that magic worked differently. And they had literally like a whole Dragon Ball Z powering up to be Super Saiyans in a fight a little while ago. Uh, and I made up game rules for how they could power it up and what they could do with that extra power. So it's really allowed me to do some crazy things, and they have had nothing but fun the whole time.
You said
But we're about ready.
you said you learned or you figured out how you were going to end it in session 0. How does that play out?
Well, I knew that I wanted to have this final boss, and I really kind of went through and I took notes when I was in the session 0 to see what every player wanted to do. And I knew that after they did all those things, they could finally end the campaign. So with that battle that they had with the Dragon Ball Z physics, one of them said that they wanted to totally go, quote, totally go Super Saiyan. And I was like, okay, we can do that. I'll figure out a way to do that. Why not? So that was literally the last box to check. So I made a final dungeon and the final boss. I kept scaling everything up to their level at the time, too. So it never felt like it was too hard or too easy for them.
That's I'm very impressed about that because from my limited experience with high level 5e play, it seems really challenging for the DM to walk that balance of throwing meaningful, challenging encounters that aren't just a fucking mess, like balance wise. Because, I mean, it's a dice game, so it should be a little bit swingy, but just the kind of spells people can throw around that just literally end encounters, it can be kind of gross, like at a certain point. Was there any fatigue, like when you're getting and you're just like, I really want to wrap this up, or did you really feel like, no, this is the right time to do this while I'm still running this high?
Well, I think one of the things that kind of gave me an advantage here was that it was with my friends that I've had for 20 years. It's my once a week that I get to hang out with them via the internet, mind you. But it's the one.
Hey, some of us, it
Where,
works.
yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, they live 3 time zones away, so it's like,
Wow.
okay, this is kind of hard to do. But yeah, since it's always been with them, and it's been an up and down ride the whole time. But overall, like we've all been wanting to see each other, so we use this as an excuse to do that.
But I mean, and I'm in the same boat where I play with my lifelong friends, but we played many different campaigns. So I guess my question is, what made you like? I get that you want to play the campaign with the friends, but you can also just start a new campaign with the same friends. What made you like literally stick to this campaign and figure out when exactly to end it? Is it just because of the and you could just kind of insert whatever things you wanted to? They really like the characters and not want to play new
They love
characters.
their characters. Yeah, they really like their characters, and they really wanted to finally defeat this boss, but they still wanted to do all these other things. I gave them so many opportunities to just go, okay, here's the final boss. And they always went some other way instead. So it's like I gave them the chance. They wanted to keep going. But I literally couldn't think of anything else for them to do at this point.
Yeah.
And because it was like an ever-changing world, nothing felt stale too, because I could just say, okay, something else weird happened with this wish paradox. Something weird is happening now. Uh, yeah, it just worked out really well, and it just was like a good free form kind of thing. I think the sandbox really helped that.
Yeah.
Do your players know that it's coming to an end?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've told them that this is the final like dungeon for about a month at this point, so they know that this is coming to an end, and they have been seething to defeat this boss for so long. They absolutely hate this villain, uh, and he's just basically this guy that wants to destroy all of time and space by keep making a wish paradox go longer and longer until chaos just engulfs everything.
Do you have the intent to do an epilogue like at the end of the session, or are you gonna meet like another time to say so much time's passed? Like what's your hopes there?
Well, I already gave them kind of a preview of it because it's has to do with what the villain is trying to do. Basically, there's a chaos gate. Think of uh, what's it called? A Stargate, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it goes through all the planes everywhere, and it can kind of bring you to any time, place in any kind of reality. So I told them that yeah, like if you can finally get through this, like and you can defeat this guy, you can walk through that gate and you can enter anyone's life that has ever lived, including your own. If you go to anyone but your own life that you had before, then you won't have any memories of what happened before this. So they kind of have this choice that's coming up that they can either remain themselves or they can be someone completely different.
Do you find as a DM, are there parts about the ending that's emotionally strong for you? Or is it a natural conclusion to, man, I'm glad this thing's gonna be finished?
I think it's just a natural conclusion. Like it just feels right at this point, and there's not really a way that I can describe it other than like that feeling of, yeah, I think this is time to end. And I should also say that I've played other campaigns with some of these other players too. Like I have an Eberron campaign that one of them was in. I did started a uh, what's it called Spelljammer campaign with a couple of them too. So it's not just like this one campaign that we've run too.
I had one more question. Do
Go ahead.
you Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just
This is
I'm
good.
interested in how other people handle the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, that's exactly what
Um,
we're doing here.
do you think that I know what it is. Do you guys already have like another thing set up to fill the time? Is somebody else going to take the mantle, or are
Mm.
you already running with a new idea?
Unfortunately, I am the forever DM
Forever
for our
DM.
group
Yeah,
right
right.
now. Yeah, but I do have an idea for the next campaign, which is going to be actually my first actual campaign, I think. Other than I started doing Curse of Strahd with a group that fell apart. They didn't know that they were doing Curse of Strahd, mind you. So that was going to be really interesting when they found out about that.
Oh, you're
But
pulling one of those like, and then the mists envelop you and you end up in Barovia?
oh
That's
yeah, because that's how it
crazy.
happened to me back in the day when, like, the first time I played a Ravenloft campaign, my DM just threw it on me back in the '80s, and I was like, "What the hell's going on? This
Yeah.
is
People were
a little
cracking
creep."
jokes like I should like do all this work for this nautical campaign, and then the first session I'll be like, and then the mists envelop you and you end up in Ravenloft. I was like, no, that'd be amazing, but also fuck no. I'm not putting all this work into one
I
thing.
could you imagine how pissed your players would be?
They've all got like these sea themed
Nautical.
characters. Good luck breathing underwater in Ravenloft, assholes. Uh, yeah, Brandon, I'm gonna put the spotlight on you. Um, Tell me about your experiences with ending campaigns, both from a DM and a player's perspective.
So my first experience with D&D was a family game that turned into a Roll20 game. Uh, I think we've been playing for about 2 years, and there was some changes for my brother-in-law who was the DM, and I think it was time and burnout for his experience. So he had been playing since he was a teenager. I never had the chance, and he was kind of doing it for me and his wife. My wife played along, but was like less interested. So it was one of those just we're all spending time together type
Yeah.
things. Um, Everybody else was super motivated, but we could all tell that he was losing some of his spark with it. And so I had said, well, hey, let me try to run a one shot. And that way you take a break and we'll see what happens. Well, I ran the one shot that turned into a three shot that had, its beginning, middle, and conclusion, and it all synced up pretty well. Well, we kept trying to play that other game, and there was no end in sight for it, which I think is where it was overwhelming for him too, is that there was no end goal necessarily. He was starting to make his own campaign, pull from his old materials, and just present us a smorgasbord of what D&D is. And time went on. He said, hey guys, I'm gonna have to take a break. So
So
that
was it?
game's
Sorry to interrupt. Was it more of like a world than a story? I guess.
yeah, so he took Lost Mines and was trying to make it set in Dragonlance. So like
Okay.
where we started out in Lost Mines and had the experience in Fandelver, he was trying to put it in, and I'm sorry because I don't remember the name of the world.
Kryn
Kryn. Yeah, he was trying to put it in Kryn, and he was trying to add things from that
or
world,
Ansalon
like
for the continent that is.
both. Yeah, both for sure. Both of those are definitely familiar and in my notes. But he was trying to add things like if we got to over level 3 spells, like they were going to be like they would wear on us more. He didn't like 5e's quick and dirty experience. He wanted a little bit more grit, I think, from the older games. Whereas I loved the 5e. Like, I'm an adult. I don't have time to sit here and calculate, as many things as need to be
Tobacco.
calculated. 5e is perfectly good, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to get the point across. So,
I mean, there's as much as we have criticisms of 5e, there's a reason it's so fucking popular. Also.
right, right. So the thing is we never technically it's just on a long hiatus right now. Like that game is just on a hiatus. There is not like a we're never playing again, but it's also like don't expect to play anytime soon.
Yeah.
But if we all can make it happen, we'll make it happen. The thing is that
Delayed
everybody's
indefinitely.
yeah. So I met two of their friends that live across the country basically, and we started playing a campaign that I ran, which was Tomb of Annihilation, which is how I came across the channel, right? Trying to get more details and information on how other people handle situations. So I just looked it up. I started in April of 2019, and my last session was on or about September 20th of 2021. And when we were coming to the end, everybody knew we were coming to the end. Everybody knew the expectation. It was pretty clear and concise. It had run its course. We had a couple people that had one or two people that had played and then couldn't make it for whatever reason, but we integrated like their characters into the story. It was super smooth. I'm trying to make this as concise as I can. When we finished the campaign, and I think everybody was reasonably satisfied with how it ended. We tried to make it tense, tried to make it meaningful. Not everybody made it out. Only one person actually was technically alive by the time it got done. And it was super cool how it worked because it was all dice rolls. Like
Yeah.
I intended to kill all of them. Like they weren't going to make it out of it. And one of them happened to just sneak out at the last possible second. It was perfect. Since then, I have been playing not with my family, but with those two guys that I was meeting that they introduced me to. And I've been since 2019. We have a regular Tuesday night game that we play, some type of like Solasta or Baldur's Gate. They
Oh,
have
that's
been
the video game crew.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So they've played in two of my other campaigns that I've been running. Anyway, they've turned into like just good weekly. I talk to them on a regular basis, friends.
Yeah.
What's been fun is that they took those characters, and when we started, one of the other players actually DM'd for us for the next game, and he made his character turn into the big bad evil guy of his campaign, essentially. So it was like I took it as a compliment that he was going to pull that character and make it, another prominent character in his campaign. Then we did uh
Did he have like an
as I've been
evil character, or did it just have a interesting turn to make that happen?
interesting turn. Yeah,
Okay.
interesting turn.
Okay.
Um Tomb of Annihilation spoilers, as a heads up, but he killed a character, Solita. As a result, he had turned into a Yuan-Ti like Mannix did.
Hmm.
And in the process of that had lost his humanity, essentially, and then was trying to get back after the end of Tomb of Annihilation. So the thing is like his campaign carried on after our campaign,
Oh,
and it
that's
was like
interesting.
timeline
Yeah.
events. So now that I'm and that one had kind of a natural conclusion. He did a great job of like um, once it was Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which has a clear, concise ending too, in my opinion. I think what would be difficult is to like my brother-in-law's campaign, or I'm super excited that you're getting to end your campaign, Lumpy, because I think taking a homebrew campaign and trying to say this is the end point is very difficult. I'd be too intimidated. But the modules have pretty clear starts, middles, and ends, and it's if you want to continue, you can. I think by the time everybody's done, my 2-year campaign, everybody enjoyed it. They had fun, but I think everybody was ready to be done with those characters and try something else.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been my attitude, and is going into this next campaign, the one we just began. My main goal was to have it not last as long as the last one, and I enjoyed the last campaign. I thought it ended up working pretty well with the story and everything, but I think partly it just maybe it's an age thing, or maybe the story was too heavy. But I think by the end of it, it was just hard to maintain that level of like narrative seriousness for that length of time. Even going week to week like we do, with only occasionally taking a week off or something, we were pretty consistent. But like even pointing to things that happened like a year ago or something, and doing like a previously on, it just gets harder to keep that up. So that was one thing I went into this campaign is like, all right, I don't want to do as deep of a story with all these little twists and intricate names and things you need to learn and figure out, and all this convoluted backstory. But B, I just don't want to necessarily have the campaign go that long, because I think it just gets tricky for us, at least, to be able to keep track of all that. We're also I think my players and I just like trying new things versus continuing along the same characters. And as I mentioned to Lumpy, I find it really challenging as a DM to maintain a level of just fun D&D system whenever we start getting into like tier 3. And maybe that's a whole nother conversation for a different roundtable conversation. It's just, I think balance starts really fun. You know what? I think there's a fucking reason that a lot of the official 5e modules don't even go beyond like level 12, for example. Like they even consider the end game to be like around 11 or 12. And Baldur's Gate 3, Larian Studios, who studied a lot of D&D, they're like, yeah, no, we're not even like you finish the game at like level 10 or 12, whatever it is. And Solasta too, like nobody wants to touch like higher level D&D because it just starts falling apart like crazy. Corey, please tell me your thoughts and experiences with ending a campaign as a player or as a DM.
I would love to, but my phone is ringing.
Oh, good.
Tell them they have terrible timing.
I've had, like I was mentioning before the thing, I've actually, one of the games that I'm running right now, and a work group of mine, I'm starting to notice life problems are making it pitter. I was always really strict on, I'm going to run the game with at least this many people. So
Yeah.
if you show up, awesome. If you can't make it, I hope you can make it to the next one, but the story is going to continue on.
Right.
And for a long time, everybody was motivated and wanted to keep coming. Well, my life changes. My youngest is in T-ball now. I've got 3 kids, so it's like trying to make time to show up to all their stuff. And I've noticed that I'm the reason why it's not happening
Yeah,
is because I
unfortunately, the
can't
DM
stick to
can't
my
make
own
it.
rule. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an awkward situation for sure. If the DM is the one that can't make the sessions, that's just going to be a no-go pretty quickly.
And I would consider switching to Roll20 because I want to finish the campaign. We're 3/4 of the way through it.
Yeah.
So to me, to not finish it is extremely unsatisfying.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Um, I would like to switch into Roll20 because I think the consistency of being able to meet people on the thing. But unfortunately, actually, two of my players don't have consistent access to the internet still,
Oh wow.
which I think is crazy. Yeah.
Playing on Roll20 has worked out really well for me and my group, and especially with this has helped alleviate a lot of the problems with being able to have little like quest markers, like video game style, so that people can keep track of what's going on. Again, even though we play every week, like we still all have shit going on. Like, it can be helpful to be able to plug people back in and keep that momentum going.
How many campaigns have you finished now? Did you add them up yet?
I did right before we started the recording. As far as I'm aware, if we're what's interesting is I actually ended a couple of adventures in Shadowrun before we did D&D. Now I think about it, but when we started 5e, Lost Mine of Phandelver, I ran. I then transitioned that campaign into Princes of the Apocalypse. So
even though it ended,
it ended,
season 1.
We did have an ending, and then when we did an epilogue and recap and everything, and then when we started Princes, we actually just, because that one, I remember, it was like 4 months, I think, long, like 20, maybe that's 5 months for 20 sessions or whatever it was pretty good. Like, which I wish Wizards would put out more of those. I don't know if the new Shards of the Phandelver or whatever is supposed to be another length like that, but like the Dragons by Spire Peak, I wish they would do more of this. Anyway, we finished that one. We did a whole epilogue and recap, and then we started Princes as a new campaign. But then we brought in all the old characters because we only made it to like level 4, I think, maybe like just the start of 5. And everybody was like just feeling like, okay, we're just now coming into our characters, and we've kind of learned a lot.
Are just now cool.
Yeah, we've like learned a lot about, because we literally all learned 5e in that campaign. Everybody can watch us all learning 5e together and watching my hilariously incorrect ways of ruling Fog Cloud and everything in that campaign. And then we went to Princes and we just started with those characters. So I was able to skip a lot of the newbie, kind of really shitty like side quest opening stuff in Princes and just start in basically with the main campaign. But then, ending that campaign was always the same. It was, defeat one of the cults at the end. That one's a little bit interesting because it's sort of moddable in a way like, almost like Dragon Heist is, I guess, where you, or Storm King's Thunder is actually probably the better one, where you can kind of choose in that one, like the order in which you tackle the different elemental cults, and whichever one you tackle last then becomes the final boss fight, which kind of lame. The villains, as much as I like how much they interact with the world, like the individual BBEG villain almost doesn't come into play till like the very end. It's a very classic, like they're just waiting in their dungeon, waiting for the players to come tackle them. But then once we got, I think maybe halfway or 3/4 to, unfortunately I wasn't doing crafting streams at the time, I pretty much knew that we were going to do fire as the last one. It just seemed like the most epic final dungeon, and it was like the highest level, I believe, compared to the others. So it just feels like fire was the appropriate one to tackle last. So then after that, we did Storm Kings, which was Chris's campaign. As far as I know, he ran the ending pretty much the same as what's written in the book. And then I ran Tomb, and that one also had, that whole mega dungeon crawl was going to be the end, and an Omu before that. So that also was a very clear, like, hey, once we get to, it has kind of an open world section, I guess, with or a hex crawl, I guess, in the jungle. But then once you get to Omu, you're done with that portion. You are like, we're on our way to the end game. And that's kind of how I like to structure campaigns in general. I feel like the best way for me to do it, taking a page from a lot of video games, is to start off fairly linear. Let's get the story up there. Let's maybe start off innocuously, and then throughout the context of the first adventure, we'll suddenly realize what the main story is and the threat. And then now you've burst onto the scene. Maybe there's a few more scripted things along the way, or maybe we immediately get into the open world section, but then the world opens up and we can go to different things. We've got all these different objectives, things to do. And then once we've, leveled up a bunch, explored the world, done some tasks, then all of a sudden the story and world narrows until you get to that end game. and then it's just boom, boom, boom. Here's probably your big dungeon or your couple of dungeons or your lost city or whatever it is that you're in. But at that point, everybody, including the players, realizes that you pretty much have that pop up message that's like, finish all your side quests. This is the point of no return, kind of a thing. So my players have, I think, always known basically where the end game is and sort of when it's coming. You might not realize. The biggest example is probably when we get to Rime, when they got to that lost city, where they knew this was going to be the thing they needed to find, but nobody, including me, maybe realized how much content there was actually still left in Rime, how many sessions that Lost City would take, because it's so big and has so much to do in there. So even though we all knew this was going to be the final area, nobody, including me, quite knew exactly how much we had left in that campaign.
Sounds like your experience that you were talking about with Zelda recently. It's like, all right, we're coming up to the end.
Oh my god!
Oh, no, we're not.
I just played it again earlier tonight, and I swear to goodness, that game, Tears of the Kingdom, without spoiling anything, that has a horrendous job of like, okay, we're at the end. No, I gotta do this other thing. Okay, now, no, wait, yeah, you gotta do this. Okay, wait, now there's one more thing. Oh, did you get that thing? Well, now you gotta go do the thing over here. And I'm just like pulling my hair out, going, game, I've played you for 90 hours. I've done all the things, and now you're telling me I have more things. Like, that's crazy. I would not. That would be the example, is if I had my players go to the Lost City and then get to the end, and then the boss retreats, and they're like, all right, now you gotta go collect like 4 things around the world. They'd be like, no, this is like, pacing wise, that just kills the pacing. I think as a DM, and the players can feel it when you're building up to that thing. The threats have gotten extreme, and everything is dire. Partly what I could do in Rime was playing up the fact that this the final city was like whatever, the Mythalar was sparking and overloading with power, and it was creating all these rifts in the far realm, and things were coming. I was really trying to play that up as this kind of background, like, apocalyptic thing going on that they had to shut down, like this nuclear bomb of magic ready to explode. And that was part of the escalation of building up to that final climax. Corey, are you with us? Would you like
I'm back.
to?
Sorry about that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I just finished wrapping up Curse of Strahd campaign. It was about 2.5 years.
Am I the only one here who hasn't played Curse of Strahd?
I have not. Yeah.
Okay. James, okay.
Well,
go ahead.
I played it years ago in second edition in the original Ravenloft campaign setting. So I ran it as a DM for a forever DM that I met in 2019 as his first campaign. And he's since decided that he is not a very happy player. He doesn't like being not in control. And he's decided that will be his probably last campaign as a character. Hopefully not because of my DMing, but yeah. But I mean, Curse of Strahd.
Sorry, I could see that being problematic. I know I have a problem of I have to check myself sometimes when I'm playing a game and talking too much and realizing like, oh wait, I'm a player, not the D. Because as a DM, you get used to like you're never not plugged in, right? You're always involved in like everybody's turn, everything that's happening. You're just on it, so you're talking all the time. And when you turn that DM into a player, that player's like, okay, every scene I need to be the one to like speak up and interact with the thing. And I know I have to check myself a lot, be like, I gotta step back and be
I think he found that. Oh, sorry. I think he found that he had a lot of what is the perfect thing to do in this scenario kind of an issue as a character. His turns took the longest. He was always second guessing what he was doing to make sure his turn was meaningful and whatnot. And at the end of the campaign, he just decided that that's it. Thanks, but no more.
Fair enough.
But Curse of Strahd does a pretty good job of letting you know what you need to finish the campaign. Right? It has that whole randomized. There are 3 items you need to beat Strahd. They're located, with a card deck choices basically all over the domain, and then once you have them, you can go to the final boss, right? And everybody knows who it is.
Which is there in the very beginning of the campaign, I think, right? It's like the first, like you go to the newbie, if you're running it like in the 5e1, you go to the newbie village, and like there, like just down the road is Castle fucking Ravenloft. Like it's just has end game. It's Castle Hyrule right there. It's going to be the end.
Yeah, so it's easy to see when the end is coming, and even then they pushed it to pushed it to the very end. I chose where the final encounter was. The players knew where it was. It was going to be at the top of the castle because there's nothing more epic than fighting a flying wizard on a nightmare, from the top turret. But so they did their best to avoid going anywhere near the top upper floors until the very last minute. So it just built up and built up, and 5e being what it is, I had them fight Strahd as written in the book. He lasted a round and a half, so that was Strahd's clone, which is technically illegal because he's not allowed to have a clone.
Doombot thing.
Yeah, and then I had them fight a souped-up Strahd that was more of a shield guardian type Strahd, where he fought and didn't use any spells other than the shield spell, and that lasted 3 rounds. And so then I did a whole lot of homework and a whole lot of homebrewing it, and they fought a CR 19 Strahd at the end, and it went 10 rounds. And
have you had sessions in between these fights then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're supposed to scare the players as often as you can while they're going through the castle. So I had clone Strahd show up while they were in the dungeon messing with his tombs. And like I said, he was grappled and lasted a round and a half before they wiped him out.
Well, that works out great for your story, though, because it's like, oh yeah, see, he's not real fully developed.
Yeah, that was a deformed early generation.
Yeah, it was a mutant Strahd.
That's like a strategy you can do with a Serac. Spoilers for, I guess, End of Tomb. But like I read one of the, because reading about the boss fights, you try to get try to get on top of that as a DM. Be like, I need to make sure I've read all the warnings about other games. And the big warning was like, yeah, like a barbarian or somebody could just grapple a Serac and jump into the lava and basically just out survive him and just not let him escape. Like, fuck, it's so stupid.
Yeah, well, I have to say the final boss was a lot better. So it was a CR 19 versus 5 CR 11s, and they used all their spell slots, but they won handily. I only had one character at 0 hit points at the end of the combat.
Was he alone?
No, he had multiple waves of monsters come in. He had red dragon gargoyles, a shadow dragon, waves of wolves and rats and bat swarms, and yeah, it was really good.
How long was the campaign, like session wise and time wise?
Well, we played. Let's see, it was 2.5 years from about 6:30 to 9 every Tuesday for 2.5 years.
And after 2.5 years, they only made it to 11?
Well, this is the first time I've ever run a module using the, what do you call it, where you don't give XP. You just level them up based on where they are in locations.
Yep.
And so it was all about them wanting to explore everything, and I even gave them hints. If you go here, it'll
you stuck to your guns, though. It's like, no matter if they did extra stuff, you're like, no, I'm only leveling with these certain things.
Yeah. And they get super overpowered in that campaign. They end up with magic items up the wazoo.
That's what I was going to ask, if they were armed to the teeth with magic items. And
my god, yeah, they looted his treasury, and they had everything they needed to defeat him, and they did. Yeah,
that has taken me years to figure out, is the fact that every time they tell you a CR like balance in terms of like monster to player, I think it assumes the players have 0 fucking magic items. And as soon as they start getting any kind of magic items, you have to effectively bump their CR up. I don't know where, but that's how players are able to punch up so much, because magic items are so like not necessary except for those few, or not few, but increasing creatures in higher levels that have the built-in resistance or immunity to non-magical weaponry. But it gets crazy with how magic items can overuse the balance. And I say that as somebody who loves giving out magic items as loot. I love loot. I love loot-based games. And it annoys the crap out of me that 5e, that like specifically unbalances 5e to a pretty big degree. And it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle on that one.
Not only that, but the 3 items that they need to defeat Strahd are basically hard vampire counters. Yeah. One is a holy symbol that I believe it gives him, if he fails a saving throw, gives him disadvantage on all his attack rolls and saving throws while he's within 30 feet of these guys.
Go ahead.
And the other one's a sunblade. And so you're fighting a vampire with an aura of sunlight around him at all times. And it's just...
The idea is he's like so unstoppable that you would need these items to bring him down to your level. But what actually happens is that makes him like like crippled. Like it just makes him incredibly much easier to take down.
Yeah, it's a complete pushover.
Has anybody, and I'm going to open this to the floor now, finished a published campaign, or as a player or as a DM, and your players wanted to keep going, and you had to come up with more content that goes beyond that campaign story?
Yep, I did a Pathfinder adventure path. What was it? Something about fighting in the desert, and you had to fight the spawn of a god, Rovagug. And when you get to the end, I think you cap out at 14th level. But they wanted to keep going.
So you played all like 5 or 6 of the
all 6 books in
book?
in the setting, and then at the end we transitioned to City of Brass, a 3.5 module from Necromancer Games that goes up into 20th level and beyond.
What was the impetus for why they wanted to keep going after they finished the campaign?
That's a good question. I just think they didn't feel satisfied at the end. Not that the adventure path was bad, just that they had more stuff to do, I guess. And I tied in City of Brass stuff throughout, because it was all about Afrits and wishes and whatnot, and why not take the war to their home turf kind of thing at the end.
Okay, so they really liked the theme and the setting, maybe, and just wanted to keep exploring that
It
area
did.
too.
And then we got to the high level stuff, and then of course, even in 3.5, everything breaks down, and it ended in a TPK on a trap. It was an imprisonment trap. And 3 characters went into it before they realized what had happened, and that left 2 people on the outside that were completely incapable of rescuing the 3 that had gone into the imprisonment trap. And that was the end of the campaign right there, deep in the City of Brass.
Well, wow, that feels dissatisfying, but I wasn't there, so I don't know.
I mean, they weren't super happy about it, but they had plenty of warning. They were breaking into a genie's vault, and it was heavily trapped, and they were talking to some sort of magical sensor on the wall that asked them their names, and when they spoke their true name, they were imprisoned. And after the first 3 went in, thinking they'd been teleported to the other side of this vault, then they kind of started thinking, well, geez, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, and then by then it was too late.
So are you saying they found out after fucking around?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I can safely say I haven't had a campaign end in a TPK. Is that anybody has had that experience besides Corey?
I hope to.
You hope to.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to just have that experience once.
You said
not.
You mentioned the end of what was it, Tomb, that like you wanted to kill everybody though, right?
Oh yeah. I tried real hard. It was close. I really did. I tried real hard. But we were down to, I think from 5 players, we were down to 3 players by the end of the campaign. My
like actual players or just alive players?
No, my alive like actual players
Okay.
playing the game.
Gotcha.
We were down to just 3 players,
Okay.
and out of those 3 players, I was able to kill 2 of them, and then the one just kind of got away circumstantially. The Lost Mines of Phandelver, I had mentioned, we had tried to continue that one, but it kind of has pittered out. I feel like a lot of times, like everybody else has talked, like as much as high level play would be interesting to try once or twice, I feel like that's more one shot territory than like end of campaign or like final climax type stuff. Because how do you build from 15 to 20 without just saying, you know what, I'm gonna rule this entire land now because nobody else can really screw with me that much.
Yeah, Chris did his whole. Sorry, I've got
no you first.
Sirens. I don't know if you guys can hear the sirens coming into my neighborhood. Chris ran that whole War for the Lost Plane campaign where we started at like 13, I think, and it was specifically he wanted to run a high level campaign. None of it, because all our campaigns had been ending at 11 or 12 or something, and we had the unique idea of actually taking some existing characters who were all had gotten to that level and then starting the campaign. I was ironically one that had the least amount of those characters because I was usually the DM. And then he's got the most experience of then us running from like 13 to 20. Now he had a very specifically structured campaign that was extremely linear. It was designed that way, to where we were going from point A to point B to point B to, well, we went B to C, C to D. And go back to B. And then each area was like 2 levels. Like it was pretty aggressively leveling up. And none of us were particularly like optimized or really knew what we were doing or had a lot of magic items either. Because we literally, that was one of his stipulations, which was smart, is we all got transported to this world at level 13 with nothing except basic gear. I think we each had like maybe 1 magic item or maybe not. I actually don't remember how the start of it went. But it was pretty light on magic items. So he has a lot of experience running high level, and yet we also couched it very specifically. Like it wasn't from like Lumpy's doing, like from like 1 to freaking 16 or something, and all the experience you have of playing the character and all the magic items you may have accrued and connections you may have made in the game. And that was another one where he had a very specific endpoint. He knew, basically he looked at a bunch of dungeons, said, I'm just going to run these dungeons and then I'm going to string them together with a story and then we'll go from there. But I don't know.
Well, that's kind of the idea. Oh, sorry. That's kind of the idea that I had. I wanted to go and do like some certain things myself too. Like my players gave me the ideas of what they wanted to do, and then I was like, well, we need to have like 1 snow dungeon because everyone likes snow dungeons. I wanted to have like 1 like deep underground kind of dungeon. I mentioned the magical amusement park before, and like so like once I got through those 2, it's like, okay, well, what else do the players want to do? So yeah, like it ended up being a actually kind of linear story because I just kind of took the player's lead.
Yeah, I could see
But
that.
yeah, I do have to say one other thing too. Have any of you guys ever had to just completely end a campaign abruptly for some reason?
That's a good question.
Like a baby? No. The thankfully I haven't. I was actually curious with James's games on them pittering out if that was an abrupt thing or if it was a natural occurrence.
It was actually pretty abrupt. Like the DM was just like, okay, we're at a point where I don't really want to play anymore, and everybody just write your own epilogue.
I'm done.
You guys, I'm going home.
Yeah. I mean, that happens. Like it, and that's the thing. Like players can drop left and right, but sometimes the DM can drop too. Like, either there's some kind of incompatibility with the player group, maybe some misunderstanding with how the game is run, or just the DM, they get excited about something and then you can get burnt out. Like burnout can, hit anybody, whether it's just like, oh, I had all these ideas, but they're just not really reaching fruition, or it turns out I really am not interested in that setting, or maybe the game system or whatever else. And yeah, I could see where if the DM wants to stop that, then that at least contacting your players and saying, hey, I'm really burnt out on this. I think that probably does ultimately do everybody a service versus having things just kind of get worse and worse and worse until eventually, people start dropping or feeling that way. I think it is probably ultimately more mature and responsible for somebody to be like, look, I'm just not feeling this anymore, and for the good of everybody, I need to stop this campaign. And sometimes maybe they'd start a new one, or other times maybe they're just like not need to play for a while. One thing I wanted to do, I did look, usually whenever we're doing a topic, is I look at the Dungeon Master's Guide to see if the has anything to say for our topic. And this one actually does. In the index, there's literally an entry for ending a campaign. It is on page 33 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. It is all of 3 paragraphs, but I think they're actually pretty solid, and I will do a reading for all of you. Ending a campaign. Because I think one of the things nobody ever does is really look at the DMG anymore. It is pretty helpful. A campaign's ending should tie up all the threads of its beginning and middle, but you don't have to take a campaign all the way to 20th level for it to be satisfying. Even they fucking know. They're like, just don't go that high. Wrap up the campaign whenever your story reaches its natural conclusion. Well, that's easier said than done. Make sure you allow space and time near the end of your campaign for the characters to finish up any personal goals. That's a good point. Their own stories need to end in a satisfying way, just as the campaign story does. Ideally, some of the characters' individual goals will be fulfilled by the ultimate goal of the final adventure. Give characters with unfinished goals a chance to finish them off before the very end. Which something I think we haven't really discussed is anytime you have those specific character arcs, I guess I mentioned in the beginning, but that's something I do try to touch on, is making sure every character has their own thing they're going through, whether it's tied into the main campaign or not, and then make sure that gets resolved somewhere along the way. Preferably, and I think almost always in my campaigns, before we get to the final area, or maybe like right at the entrance to the final area. That way we can just focus on main story. And again, I cite as a lot of references RPGs that I've played, like the Dragon Age, Mass Effect series, a lot of JRPGs. Like they all kind of do this kind of thing where they have their individual stories, and those tend to wrap up right before the very ending location. Once the campaign has ended, a new one can begin. Thanks, Wizards. If you intend to run a new campaign for the same group of players, using their previous characters' actions as the basis of Legends gives them immediate investment in the new setting. Yes, that's a cool thing, and I would definitely recommend doing the expanded universe thing, especially if you are running games, obviously, in the same world, which 5e seems to almost solely recognize the Sword Coast of the Forgotten Realms. I guess we have a little bit of Chult, a little bit of Icewind Dale, but I think that's a neat thing to do, is to create that those fun little references, kind of like the MCU, where it doesn't require necessarily even the character showing up, but just somebody mentions the character or mentions an event that happened. I think can go a long way with creating that kind of cool buy-in where the player's like, oh yeah, I remember that thing, or this city is now destroyed because of what your characters did, or this one hero now runs an academy, or is in charge of this whole faction or something based on those past actions. Let the new characters experience how the world has changed because of their old characters. In the end, though, the new campaign is a new story with new protagonists. They shouldn't have to share the spotlight with heroes of days gone by. That's the whole thing on ending a campaign, which is, I think, pretty solid advice. There's specific stuff on ending an adventure, but I think I don't know what they mean by ending it. I guess maybe ending a smaller module size adventure, which I don't know. That's similar. I guess a campaign maybe is a bunch of adventures put together, if we think about it like that, like an adventuring day. I do think ending a session, though, should be an entirely different DM Roundtable topic, because that is something that I have a lot of thoughts about and gets very tricky for somebody like me who runs relatively shorter sessions than a lot of the average sessions are. And I find that to be a challenge every single time I play, is knowing when to end a session. Let's do our final wrap-ups for the ending a campaign topic. I'm going to go in reverse order this time. So, Corey, give me your final thoughts, tips, or stories on ending a campaign.
Well, as that being the only 5th edition campaign I've run for anybody.
It doesn't have to necessarily be 5th edition. It can be really anything. I guess
well,
it's called
I
the DM
appreciate
Roundtable.
that it was easy for it to wrap up the way the module was written, and it made it, the players knew it was ending, and the DM knew it was ending, and that made it all, run smoothly. Whereas I've run a lot of Pathfinder campaigns and older school D&D modules, and they tended to end either in a TPK or, a party stop. And that doesn't seem to be the case too much in 5th edition anymore. I think that's more of an old school type ending. So I think it went pretty well.
That's very interesting. I don't have a lot of experience with older editions of D&D outside of older video games. I do like that 5e tends to, and I probably know the reason why it's fairly popular, really looks at the players as the heroes of the story, and generally people want their heroes to succeed at the end. Like the sweet spot, we talked about balance for other DM roundtables also, is that they have to earn it, right? Like the best case scenario for me as a DM is you win by the skin of your teeth. Like that is the best case scenario for me. Like I never want to kill off my player characters, but if I can really maim them or deeply wound them or make it so everybody's like sweating bullets, by the end, that's what makes it so memorable for me. And again, with the balance, like you can have it go too much and people just get frustrated, and you go too much the other way and it's like just not as memorable because like, oh yeah, we kicked their ass. But if you can get that sweet spot, then yeah, I think that creates a really good ending. And thankfully, yeah, I think a lot of the 5e campaigns, they either err on the side of it being too easy, like you mentioned with Strahd, or hit it actually pretty close by. I haven't seen any that really would be like, oh my gosh, this looks absolutely impossible. Brandon, final thoughts on ending a campaign?
I think when you mentioned when we had the conversation about somebody saying, "Hey, I'm just kind of done," and it being a more mature way to handle it, it made me think that a campaign ends up being a lot like a relationship, and that if the relationship
With
is
like 4 or
getting
5
a little
people.
rocky, yeah, a
Yeah.
little rocky, not so smooth. Sometimes it's best to probably just end it, but be mature about it. I
Yeah.
think it's sad too, right? When you've spent
Yeah.
so much time with somebody, there's like a natural decay to the end of I was going to say a relationship, but to the end of a campaign, like a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're losing your friends, it's not that you're losing the characters that you've
It
become
could be,
attached
depending
to.
on how the campaign's ending, it could be.
Yeah. So the thing is I think it's a lot like a relationship, and
Yeah.
that if you treat it with respect, if you treat it with maturity, if you treat it with the the honor that it deserves for everybody's time involved, I don't think it's a sad event at the end of it. I think everybody can be disappointed that it's over, but look forward to what's next.
Yeah. Well said. Lumpy, final thoughts on ending a campaign, and it's on your mind, especially right now.
I think my number one bit of advice is to make sure that you're constantly talking to your players. Like, get their feedback after every session, see how much fun they're having, and try to tailor the ending to when they're about ready to go. And session zero is a great way to find out what kind of goals they have, so you know exactly like how far you have to go in this campaign before they can achieve those.
We started doing our post session chats, I think during Chris's War for the Lost Plane, and that has been amazing as a way to garner that instant feedback with my players specifically. Some of them we usually rotate in a few people, but I've also got my regulars who are my fellow night owls. But it's been really helpful to get that feedback for sure, and that's one way we've been able to discuss that after every single session. And I don't think I've had a single campaign where my players weren't ready for the end. I think that's every time we've been, it just feels like the time. Now they've all the latest ones have been well over a year, so it's not like we're running shorter stuff. But I yeah, I've never had somebody say, oh gosh, I wish we still had this, or I still wish we could do this or that. Like, it always feels like this is the right time to do the end game, and this is the end game will progress from there, and the end always seems to be a pretty good timing. James, final thoughts about ending a campaign?
Yeah, my favorite ending is when the players win, but they all die anyway. Give me that Iron Giant, Superman, noble sacrifice.
Which is that what you were trying to do, Brandon, with yours? You were wanting everybody to win but still die in the process?
I wanted it to mean something. I didn't want Serac to be a pushover necessarily.
Yeah.
So it was just that I wanted it to be like a, hey, you did all this stuff and you saved the world, but yeah,
But what did
you
it
didn't
cost?
you didn't make it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And that can sometimes be incongruous with how just powerful the player characters are in general, right? You want to throw all these cool big threats and these world-ending things and basically have, to me, 5e honestly becomes almost more of a superhero genre at that point, because superheroes, it reminds me of the same thing where like they very rarely actually die, and even when they do die, they're basically just gone for a couple of years in comic world and then come back eventually. Like, you just can't ever truly kill larger than life characters like that, and I feel like that's almost what a lot of 5e characters end up growing into, is just becoming that powerful. Now you can still have awesome superhero stories and still tell really cool stakes and have really meaningful moments, but yeah, death should still be on the table. Obviously, that's a topic for a number of DM roundtables we've done. But I, yeah, I have mixed feelings on it, I guess. But to me, they're basically superheroes kicking ass, and if we can kill one or two, then that's also a good time. Yeah, from my own experience, ending a campaign for the published 5e modules, they honestly, I think, do a pretty good job of it. I haven't had to rewrite any of the finale. Rhyme was probably the one I did the most because of that. Spoilers for Rhyme, I guess, but they have a weird thing where like you can technically take down Oriel like 3/4 through the campaign or 2/3 of the campaign or something weird. But then it also mentions like, or you can have her show up like at the end of the city adventure. Like, well, yeah, obviously that's going to be a thing. I guess I had to design a lot of that like literal final fight, but I knew that was always going to be the end game battle in that one. But they've done a pretty good job of setting you up for success, I think, on a lot of the end stuff. They have a pretty good climax. If anything, the published modules are too guilty of throwing too powerful of things at the end that the players should have no legitimate reason fighting. As Serac is a great example. Iamrith in Storm King's Thunder is a good example. The motherfucking Demogorgon at the end of Out of the Abyss is a good example. Like, they want you to be able to take on all these insanely huge, famous threat, like fucking Tiamat, I believe, at the end of Tyranny of Dragons. And yet the players aren't even 20th level. Like, so instead they have to cheat and they have to like, oh, you've got trickster gods or you've got giant allies or whatever kind of bullshit, or Demogorgon's been like super weakened from other things. So I get that they want to do the thing of like being super climactic, and I love that for a storytelling standpoint, but it also feels weirdly unearned when you're not at the like max level of your XP bar kind of a thing. But so far my players, other than that little bit of weirdness, haven't really worried about it too much because I think we just love the memorable feeling of, kicking ass against really big threats. All right, I think that will do it for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you so much to James, Lumpy, Brandon, and Corey for joining me. And thank you to all the patrons of patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplayer, Roll, Christopher, Brian, Corey, Koa1337, Big Nut, John F, John L, Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Camp Crystal Lake Counselor, Andrew C, Daryl the Reldrin, Captain Woody79, Stephanie, Andy, P01135809, and Patrick, and the gold patrons RPG Paper Cramps, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Karen, William, Jerry, Thomas, and Prophet. Thank you all very much for your support. Hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion.
Thanks for the conversation.